All right, hi guys. Welcome to Unit 2. That means by now we've had a test, you've crushed it, and you are doing well, growing, getting better, stronger, prepared for life. All right, so today we start Unit 2, all right? And these are our first 3 pages of notes, right? 1 through 3. And so it's Unit 2, all right? We've knocked out the constitutional underpinnings, the big framework, and now we're kind of going to start diving into these subunits within the American political culture, all right? So let's look at page 1, political culture. So first of all, culture is a shared set of values, all right? Widely shared beliefs, norms that citizens hold and share about their government. Right? And so if you look at the characteristics of our political culture, we tend to have this kind of nice list, right? Liberty, individualism, this idea of equality, more equality of opportunity than necessarily the equality of result. This idea of democracy. Now you know after that first unit in the first essay that the form of democracy that our framers chose was a republican system. This idea of civic duty, this idea that citizens need to get involved for our political system to work. All right? There's a general distrust of government within our American political culture. And you can see that all the way back from the Articles of Confederation. We can see that with the Declaration of Independence, in which the framers laid out their arguments of why government was bad and what it had done in the experience, right? The Articles limited the power of government. The Constitution of 1789 initially tended to be one of a limited government or a constitutional government that kind of outlined, one, not only the powers that government had, but two, in the Bill of Rights, made a list of things the government couldn't do to you and the rights that they had to protect. And so even if you're a D or an R, liberal, a conservative, whatever it is, there generally tends to be this, there has been, compared to other political cultures, a distrust of government. All right? This idea of political efficacy is another part of our shared political culture, right? And efficacy is the ability to understand the system and then the ability or feeling that you have that you can influence the system. So efficacy levels are something ideally that the American political culture, people felt high levels of efficacy in the sense that they, one, understood how our system worked, and that's kind of our goal this year, right? And two, that they felt that they could actually impact that system. Those are the kind of two elements of political efficacy, and ideally those efficacy levels are soaring through the roof by the time you leave this classroom this year, all right? The other part of our shared political culture is this idea of tolerance, right? We believe that we should be tolerant. Now, one of the things we'll work on all year is listening to other people's points of view, listening to other perspectives, right? Trying to be political scientists and understand what other points of view are in this system. Now, tolerance is something that I think that people tend to say, yes, I'm very tolerant as the idea of tolerance, but when things that challenge their beliefs, things that come against what they believe, maybe people tend to be less tolerant at times, all right? And we'll have that discussion as well in class. Ideally, in our class this year, as we go through the debate, the hot topics of the American political culture, you do become tolerant of the variety of viewpoints that exist within our classroom and then within our country, all right? It doesn't mean you have to believe them, but definitely this idea of tolerance and diversity within the American political system, all right? Also, the American political culture tends to be pragmatic. And what that means is, and again, these are big kind of stereotypes or generalities as we kind of take this dive and look in. There's way more intricacy and nuance to these things, all right? But Americans tend to be pragmatic in the sense of we are willing to elect whatever political party we believe can get the job done. People are willing, those moderates in our system, which we'll get to in a second, are willing to leave the Republican Party or willing to leave the Democratic Party and go to the other side if they see a leader or a political party they think can get the job done. All right? And then again, this idea of justice, right? And now ideally, justice is outlined in our Constitution. Justice is defined as doing what is right, what is just, what is fair. All right? We believe in those. Now, justice has a wide range of definition and at moments in history, right? Or I guess we could do, and we could look at Socrates and Plato and say that justice will always be relative to the person defining it. And you guys may believe that, I don't know. Is there an absolute definition of justice? Can you define it? Can we define it in class? What is true justice? All right? So those, again, like I drew this serious map of the United States, right? So the entire American political culture has those values of liberty, individualism, equality, democracy, civic duty, distrust of government, efficacy, tolerance, pragmatism, and justice. We generally tend to, as we start this debate today, share those values. Now, of course, I know that we disagree probably on the very definition of a lot of those things, but those tend to be this kind of collective sense that we share. All right? Okay. Now, the next set of pages, let's move over to 2 and 3. Now, it's about ideology, right? Now, ideology, as opposed to culture, is an individual set of beliefs. So you and I, let's just assume for this argument, bring all those things from our American political culture, right? And now we have our own individual set of beliefs that we hold. All right, and we're going to get into those over the next couple of days as well. But we have all these funky words, right? And I don't know if you can really see this, but we have this idea of this is a political spectrum, right? Here's the left side, here's the right side. All right, and we tend to define, we're going to stereotype, and we're just going to name these ideologies to begin our discussion, right? There's way more nuance. There's much less that is clear about them, but at least we can have this discussion to start, and ideally you'll get an understanding of what these words mean and how they fit into the American political system, all right? So, if you look at this, what I've done is I've kind of said, okay, here's our left side, here's our right side. And this discussion of ideology is really like the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, the Centralists and the Decentralists, whatever we've looked at so far, this idea of what is the proper role of government, all right? And that's probably going to be a question that will be asked throughout human history, that will certainly be discussed in the American political system when your great-great-great-great-great-grandkids are in my AP government class, all right? It's not something we're probably going to answer, but it's definitely something that we're going to be discussing, the appropriate role of government. And so here's what I've got. If you generally kind of look at this idea of liberals and conservatives, right? In your notes you can see liberals and conservatives. Liberals tend to be on the left-hand side of the political spectrum. And the left-hand side of the political spectrum, again, these are stereotypes, tends to say they agree that there's an increased role in government. That government should play a role in our society, all right? Now, on the right-hand side of the political spectrum, which we generally call conservative, right, generally tends to believe that there should be a smaller role in government in society, all right? Now, what you're going to see over the next few days in this whole unit is there are times when liberals will want government out of something, and there are times when conservatives want government to play a role. So they're kind of going to, it's not contradiction, it's just the nuance of their belief systems, all right? So it's really about the role of government, but a general stereotype is the left tends to say smaller government. I'm sorry, the left tends to say more government. The right tends to say less government. All right, and now if you look at some of these words, let's start with something that's really going to mess with your head. I put classical liberal on the right, which should be on the left according to what I told you. But generally, the framers were classical liberals, right? At a time in the Enlightenment in which a classical liberal meant small role of government. They had seen the monarchies around the world, the emperors throughout human history, the empires, in which government was absolutely tyrannical. And so the framers believed that government was something to fear. And again, we see that with checks and balances. We see that with constitutionalism. We see that with the Bill of Rights. All right? We see that in the government saying, look, you know, here's a list of things you can't take away from its citizens, its natural rights. And by limiting its power with checks and balances, separation of power, federalism, constitutionalism, outlining its powers and saying you can't go beyond that, and then even making a list with the Bill of Rights saying these are things you can't do. You can't deny, you know, essentially religious freedom, political freedom, etc., which we'll get into later, all right? Because the framers viewed government as something to be feared from there, and that was based, again, on their witnessing human history to that moment. All right? So, now generally over here what we see, let's look at the left for a minute, all right? Well, we have the classical liberals, right? Small government, like our framers. Now let's bounce and look at these liberals, all right? Generally what we had from the 30s to the 70s, just like when we looked at marble cake federalism or cooperative federalism, we saw the role of government grow, correct? The federal government, not the state government necessarily. And so that corresponds to the growth of modern liberals. Modern liberals believe that there should be an expanded role of government, that government can be a good thing, that government can, to use the notes quotes, to smooth out the rough edges of capitalism. Right? There was a lot of good things about capitalism, but there was the free market, but there were also bad things about an absolute free market, an absolute zero role for government in watching the businesses or the free market. All right? They believe they should get in there and talk about, you know, child labor laws, safety at work, you know, a lot of these things. All right? They got involved in, and this corresponds with the Great Depression, like we talked about in class, and goes into the 70s, right, with LBJ and the Great Society. All right? Now, let's just stay on the left for a minute. All right? And if you look at socialism, socialism is farther to the left. I'm not going to put anybody in any specific place because I think there's nuance to that, and we should discuss that. But socialists tend to be farther to the left because they believe there's a much bigger role than modern liberals believe there should be in government, all right? That they believe that government should own the means of production, right? Business stuff, energy, transportation, communication, that kind of thing, all right? There's a huge role for government, right? And that's definitely been something that's kind of a taboo within American political culture, because there's such a sense of individual liberty that kind of drives the American political system, all right? But it's definitely much more popular and been more accepted in kind of Western Europe and other parts of the world, all right? Now, neoliberals, all right? So if we put socialists out here, modern liberals somewhere, neoliberals are the closest to the center because neoliberals are actually a little bit more moderate or a little bit more conservative when we compare them to other liberals because they believe, you know what, maybe government is too big. Maybe there should be a limited role in government, right? Or at least more of a limited role than modern liberals believe, all right? Maybe not to the point, though, of conservatives who believe that a much smaller role of government. All right, now, if we go over to the right, or the conservative side, like I said, we have our founding fathers, the classical liberals who didn't like government. All right, they're afraid of government, that it could be tyrannical and oppressive. All right, so conservatives, again, generally tend to link themselves to the classical liberals. Now, also, just as an aside, there's going to be liberals on this side that link themselves to the framers too, this belief in equalities, beliefs in liberty and freedom and justice. Those are things that, again, we all share. All right? This is about the role of government, the size of government, the scope of government. Okay? And now, what we have over here is if we look, we throw the conservatives to the right-hand side, and then we take these neoconservatives, which you'll see in your notes, and these are people, neoconservatives tend to be a little bit more conservative out here on the side, right? And again, I think these lines can go for a long way outside of my little ghetto chart here, this little janky chart right here, all right? And then libertarians are farther right in the sense that they believe that there should literally be this extreme emphasis on the individual, this extreme emphasis on liberty, and government should get out of your private life. Government should get out of your business, right? And that the government's sole job is to protect the country, to defend the borders, and that's about it. And then private individuals will set up trade, private individuals will set up schools, and all these kind of things that run society, all right? So again, we generally tend to throw the classical liberals, the conservatives, the neocons, and the libertarians on the right-hand side of the spectrum, whereas the modern liberals, the neoliberals, and the socialism is on the left-hand side of the spectrum, with socialism being the farthest, then modern liberalism, and then neoliberalism. And over here, you know, the framers distrust government, like most Americans do, according to our political culture, all right? And then the conservatives out here, and neocons and libertarians farther to the right, all right? Now, you also know that I put a moderate here, all right? Moderates in the middle. this goes back to the idea of Americans tend to be pragmatic. Most Americans view themselves as moderate. Now again, if you're born to a very conservative family, this is your political reality and you're in the middle, you may see yourself as moderate. And the same if you're born to a liberal family and you see yourself out here, right, your family, if you're here, you're moderate in your paradigm or your view, right? All right, so that's a general kind of outline of liberal conservative, right? There's way more, a whole lot more nuance to it than that, all right? I think that's it. That's a 15-minute lecture. Please look at that and let me know if you have any questions and I'll be glad to answer them, okay? All right, have a good night.